I'm Jeremy Loffredo on assignment for Rebel News in Kingman, Arizona, where the U.S. trucker convoy arrived last night. They departed 300 miles east of here in Adelanto, California, and arrived around sundown. They're set to leave Kingman, Arizona in about 2 hours. You can see the sun's coming up, the truckers are waking up before their 300-mile stretch to New Mexico east. All the trucks behind me are brand new. You can tell that the truckers have grown exponentially since leaving California.
This grew overnight. I mean, there was half the trucks here last night, so there's a lot of support.
We're bigger on semis, we're bigger on campers, and we're bigger on cars.
As far as the convoy and how big it's gotten, I started in California. It's amazing. The amount of support and people, you emotionally break down. I've done it 2-3 times, and it's heart-wrenching.
We need to get rid of these mandates. People are getting fired. People are can't get in the hospitals. Nurses are getting fired. So many people's lives are at danger right now. So basically, we need to raise the word and bring into fruition that our government needs to work for us. We don't work for them.
Well, Rebel News covered the Canadian truckers convoy better and more than anyone else. There was one point in time we were in 9 cities in Canada covering different aspects of the convoy. We were embedded with it from almost its beginnings. In Western Canada, as it made its way east, I believe that we helped tell an important story that was ignored at first and then, frankly, mistold deliberately by the corporate media and the government who were opposed to the convoy. Well, the Canadian convoy has more or less ended. It forced an issue in which Justin Trudeau brought in a form of martial law, and I think it showed a lot of weaknesses in Canada's checks and balances for democracy. But one of the things the truckers in Canada did was inspire other trucker rebellions around the world. Places as diverse as the Netherlands, Israel, France, and now the United States, where a trucker convoy has started in California and is deliberately making its way east to Washington, D.C. And I'm delighted to say that we have a freelance reporter who is covering the American convoy with us, who started in L.A., is now in New Mexico. His name is Jeremy Loffredo, and he joins us now via Skype along the side of the highway. Jeremy, nice to have you. Thank you very much for taking up this important mission for us at Rebel News. It's great to have you on board on this assignment.
Thanks, Ezra.
So you're in New Mexico right now. Tell me how it started in California, because it felt a little more organized than the Canadian one, which was pretty spontaneous. Tell us a little bit about the American convoy.
Sure. So it was planned about a week and a half in advance. We met in California, and there was only about maybe 100 or so big rigs and a couple hundred cars. And now, 3 days later, we're making our way 600 miles further than when we started in New Mexico, and it's grown exponentially. There's hundreds of big rigs, there's hundreds of cars. It's growing by the day, and by the night, more people are showing up.
Now, in Canada, it took a while for this thing to become known, and soon people started spontaneously coming to the side of the road or to overpasses to cheer it on. I don't think that happened at first. It took a while for the story to be told, but it really spread person to person. It wasn't really through the mainstream media. Has that phenomenon begun in your American convoy yet? Do people know about it? Are they expecting it? Are they coming out to wave it on or cheer it on at all?
People definitely know about it. So we are, like I said, we're 600 miles from where we started, and not one overpass did not have supporters waving American flags, waving Canadian flags, and waving that new flag that you might have seen, which is the American flag combined with the Canadian flag on one flag, which was started, everybody's cheering on Canadians. Everyone's thanking Canadians for what they started.
Isn't that interesting? You know what? The idea that Canada would create a freedom movement that others, including in America, would follow, that's got to be a novelty. I mean, I've never heard of that before. Normally, we're more quiet, and if anything, we're followers rather than leaders when it comes to freedom. I'm delighted to hear it. Now, one of the things in Canada was I think there was a class divide that was exposed by it, because there's certain people who I think really love the lockdowns and love the pandemic, and they've never lost a day's pay. Maybe they didn't work, but maybe they just got paid anyways. Maybe they could work from the cottage or something via Zoom. Whereas the working class, truckers never stopped trucking. And in fact, not just big rig truckers, long distance haulers, but even drivers within the city who, for DoorDash or Amazon, like those folks didn't take a day off. And they often, especially in those early days when we didn't really know a lot about the virus itself, they had to show courage. And I don't know, I think that suddenly the pandemic has turned against these working class folks. Anyone who's in these big unions was forced to be jabbed, even though it wasn't in the collective agreement. I just felt like, I don't know, about 6 months ago, things really turned sour and there was a classism. And I say this as a conservative guy. I normally don't talk in the language of class, but it was hard not to notice it. And I felt like this truckers' rebellion truly was a workers' rebellion. It felt like a general strike. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a working class nature to what's going on there in America too? And how does that play into American politics? You'll have to educate us because we're Canadians up here.
Of course. So there's 100% a class divide in who supports the truckers and who does not support the truckers. Most of the supporters on the overpass today were not from Albuquerque, which is, the biggest city in New Mexico. They were from the rural parts of New Mexico. And they were waving their flags and they were cheering on the convoy. And as we were getting our cameras ready, someone walked out of an office building and said, "What are all those people waving their flags about? What are they yelling about?" And we told them what it was about. It was about the convoy. The truckers are being fired if they don't get the jab, et cetera, et cetera. And they kind of scoffed and they kept walking. And she was walking, she was wearing suit pants, and she was walking out of an office building. And just in that one interaction, you could see that you have these people who consider themselves progressive liberals scoffing at those who are working class Americans with less money than them, most likely.
I saw some of that in Canada. I also saw an interesting thing is that in Canada, a lot of the truckers are from minority background. For whatever reason, a lot of Canadian truckers are Indo-Canadian, including Sikh truckers. There's also Indigenous people, what in America might be called Indians or what we call Métis. So there's a lot of truckers who are from a variety of backgrounds. Now, they were denounced by our prime minister that he called them racist and misogynist, and he even used the word Nazi, which seemed very at odds with the mix of people. Like, trucking is a real entry-level trade or job. If you can get that commercial driver's license, really it's open to people it really is a doorway into small business and work for new Americans. I imagine that's how I think that's one of the reasons so many new Canadians are in it. But they called them racist. Is that same demonization afoot in America? You're in the Southwest. I'm guessing there's lots of people who are might be called Latino or other folks like that. Can you tell me the demographics of these truckers?
Sure. So we're in the Southwest of the United States. We're very close to Mexico, and we're also surrounded by different Indian reservations, Native American Navajo tribe, and these people, like anyone else, they, at some point needed a job and they decided, I'm going to get into trucking. So, yes, you definitely see some diversity in these truckers, and you see even more diversity in the people supporting the truckers. We haven't seen any demonization from Joe Biden himself. He hasn't acknowledged the situation. But from the mainstream media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, BuzzFeed, MSNBC, they have all put out stories and then more stories on how these truckers have links to the far right, are extremists. They're all white, which is bad, of course. It's completely different from the real story. If only they came out here and saw who the truckers were, they would not turn on their cameras because they would be so embarrassed.
Well, one of our mottos at Rebel News is telling the other side of the story. And the best way to do that is just flip on the camera. And one of the things we did in the Canadian trucker convoy is we just sometimes did a live stream, and that camera was on for 3-4 hours. And there was commentary along the way, but I think people appreciated just seeing with their own eyes what was happening. A lot of that happened in Ottawa. So I think just showing the fact is a great service. So I'm really grateful to you for riding along, because you're right. If a pundit is giving commentary on the truckers from a studio in LA or a studio in Manhattan, but they haven't seen with their own eyes, they're just, retelling or rehearsing a false fact. So it's important what you're doing on the ground to actually document who's there. Now, I got one last question for you. Mm-hmm. One of the things that worries me is that I know that this trucker movement, I mentioned how it's spread around the world. It's become so symbolic, and it really is a kind of natural resistance to the pandemic lockdownism and the mandatory big pharma vaccine. So it's a symbol, and they want to smash the symbol. I remember a few years back they tried to demonize the yellow vest, the Gilets jaunes movement out of France, and I think they want to do the same here because it's such a powerful, authentic grassroots thing. So I'm worried that there's going to be some false flag agents, provocateurs. And before you say, oh, Ezra, you're just being paranoid, I know that the FBI, in some very spectacular recent cases, has done this sort of thing. There were a half a dozen FBI agents who were actually, I know this sounds nuts, they were in a scheme to kidnap the Democratic governor of Michigan, believe it or not. And that thankfully unraveled before it happened. But I'm quite sure that there are people who are being embedded with this trucker convoy with the goal of, denormalizing them, having them say something so discrediting that it redounds to the discredit of the whole group. Have you detected anything like that, or are you on alert for that? Because it wouldn't surprise me if, and I'm not saying they're necessarily FBI, they might just be political operatives who are trying to muck things up. Who knows, could even be the Lincoln Project. They've done that sort of thing before. Have you had any observations in those lines?
Well, I mean, agent provocateurs, entrapment programs is the FBI's game. And, the white conservatives have now taken the place of as the, terrorists that was normally occupied by, Middle Eastern people. So now that they've taken over this title, it's given federal law enforcement essentially the ability to go in and do anti-terror tactics, entrapment programs, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, this convoy is criticizing, Big Pharma and the state. And there's nothing more damaging than that right now, especially in the middle of this COVID regime that we find ourselves in. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised if something like that happened. And also, there's not embedded in the convoy, there's someone going around not at all affiliated with the convoy, giving quotes to the media as if they are affiliated with the convoy. No one knows which organization this person actually works for, but they're saying once we get to Washington, we are going to strangle the federal government, using violence. And the convoy has never been about that, and they've said that multiple times is about peace. We just don't want to take this vaccine. We just don't want to get fired. So there's definitely people being embedded in the media and elsewhere that are supposed to be discrediting this convoy.
Yeah, I saw that. I think they used a snake analogy of like strangling. Well, I saw that even reported up here in Canada. So planting those themes and denormalizing and demonizing the trucker convoys happening down there. I can see it. Well, Jeremy, we're so glad you're embedded there. I'll let you go because I know you want to catch up to the rest of the truckers. Great to have you on with this mission, this assignment. Jeremy Loffredo, keep it up, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, guys.
All right, there you have it. We're covering the U.S. convoy. Stay with us. More ahead. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.